Kan Profesor Shankar kemarin sudah baik hati.
Menghapus writing.
Jadi kalau Profesor Shankar tahu Fahid talking about listening, diomit juga itu listening.
Okay. Bisa ngecek ini bentar, bisa ya, bisa slide untuk
boleh screen share aja.
Cuma untuk meyakinkan kalau nanti bentuknya pas.
Oke.
Sambil dilihat ya, ini kebaca atau enggak? Karena ini teksnya terlalu banyak di slide ini. Oke. Mungkin sharing aja. Kayaknya bakal pakai desktop aja. Kelihatan nggak tulisannya?
Kelihatan.
Oke, terus kelihatan nggak?
Tapi itu belum di ini ya, full screen.
Ya belum. Ini kelihatan yang apa? Telegram.
Telegram kelihatan.
Oke. Berarti kemudian ke sini. Oke, berarti ini service. Ini kalau pindah kelihatan kan ya?
Kelihatan kok.
Oke. Karena nanti kayaknya apa share full screen nggak share apa namanya? Nggak share cuma slide-nya aja.
Oke.
Nunggu
Fahidnya mana?
Selamat datang Pak Christian.
Halo Pak Gede.
Halo.
Saya ternyata Pak Gede ini kakaknya ini ya, siapa namanya? Siapa yang dihukum?
Oh ya, si Ketut Yoga.
Ketut Yoga ya. Karena dulu sama-sama di ISO, jadi sering ketemu.
Oh iya.
Ini live streaming mulai jam berapa ya, Bi? Sudah mulai kan live streaming? Fahidnya mana?
Fahid mana Fahid? Begitu Fahid datang langsung kita mulai ya.
Ya, kalau Fahid yang mulai muncul sekarang ya belum bisa mulai. Masih 10 minutes to go.
Dari tadi saya cari nama-nama Fahid ini. Cuma apa?
Ya. Oke. Itu nggak bisa admin mute-in semua ya, nggak bisa? Oke.
Kita nunggu Fahid sebentar.
Ya, selamat siang semuanya.
Siang Bu Ari.
Iya. Krista nggak pakai background memang.
Kayak hantu Bu, pakai background silau.
Oh. Ya.
Maaf ya Bu, dia bosan pakai.
Iya.
Jadi
Nisa gimana? Udah tugasnya Nisa nggak ada ya hari ini. Ya, nggak ada suara Nisa ya.
Ada Bu suara Nisa, kedengeran nggak?
Kedengaran, ya. Ya. Gita, gimana? Sudah di Lampung atau masih di Bandung?
Sudah di Lampung, Bu.
Sudah di Lampung ya.
Sudah, Bu.
Terus Novita masih di rumah?
Ya, Mem, di rumah ini.
Iya, sama Bu Ari juga di rumah. Mau ke kampus lagi capek banget.
Iya, takut sinyalnya putus-putus hujan.
Iya. Mbak Dian di rumah juga ya? Oh, Mbak Dian belum ada suara. Christian apa kabar Christian?
Oh, alhamdulillah, Bu Ari.
Sehat?
Sehat,
Iya.
alhamdulillah.
Iya. Suaranya jelas nggak Christian? Kurang jelas ya?
Oh, jelas, Bu Ari.
Oh, jelas ya? Iya. Ya, oke. Jadi hari ini peserta berapa, Fajar? Mana Fajar belum kelihatan? Fajar masih behind. Oh ya. Fajar hari ini peserta berapa Fajar?
Kalau di Zoom-nya 100 seperti kemarin, tapi kita ada di YouTube juga, kemungkinan sekitar 1.300-an di YouTube.
Iya. Peserta sudah diberitahu kalau kemarin pada mental karena memang kapasitas hanya 100.
Sudah, Bu.
Ya.
Sudah di
Tadi soalnya ada yang nanya ya, Novita ya, dari prodi apa tadi itu ya?
Iya, Mem.
Nggak bisa masuk gitu. Ya udah kalau udah diberitahu. Oke.
Tapi tadi udah dijelasin.
Iya. Ya udah. Nanti Bu Ari kembali lagi.
Sebentar, mana Fahid?
Mana ini Fahidnya? Yes. Bisa ya? Hah? Harusnya.
Bisa. Kenapa, Mas?
Aku yang ngomong ya. Ini kali ya.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Oke. Berapa peserta ini sekarang, Pak Gede?
Halo?
Halo, Fahid.
Ya, iya. Betul ya? Ya, betul.
Oke, thank you. I'm waiting. Oke.
Ya, itu bisa ngomong gitu.
Siap, Mas Tias.
Halo.
Hai, Fahid.
Hai, Fahid. Halo, Fahid.
Oke. Hai.
Hi. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
good.
loud and clear.
Nice. Good to see everyone.
Yes, nice.
Okay, so we still have 6 more minutes before 2 o'clock.
Okay. Still have time.
Yes. Do you want to trying share screen? No.
My screen?
Try share screen. I think that's already fine.
Did you? Are
Do you
you?
want to try share screen?
Oh
No?
yeah. Yes, I can share the screen now. Let me see. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Nice.
Okay.
Can you still see them?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. All right.
Okay.
Very good.
Empat menit lagi kita mulai, Pis.
Okay.
Pak Gede atau Pak Fajar jangan lupa screenshot ya Pak Gede.
Oh iya Bu, nanti kita di akhir kita ambil screenshotnya Bu.
Iya.
Ini dibikin jadi attendees semua aja bisa nggak? Jadi hanya beberapa yang jadi panelis.
Panelis
Kalau wajah Mama itu nggak bisa terang gimana ya Pip? Penyebabnya apa Pip? Selalu kayak membelakangi.
Make it the attendees. Oh, sorry, make it the panelists become the attendees.
Mungkin jangan di sini Pak, nggak enak. Aku nggak tahu ya Pak, ini yang kedua itu aku nggak tahu.
Satu menit lagi kita mulai, Pis.
Oke.
Satu menit lagi kita mulai, Pis.
1 minute lah.
Okay, shall we start?
Yep. 2 o'clock already.
Sambutan kuda ya?
Enggak. Mungkin ditanya sama Pahit sama Katianya dulu, Miss.
Iya, Miss, ditanya dulu, Miss.
Wait, and Christian, shall we start now? Okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our international webinar with our topic online EFL teaching and assessment in the new normal. This global pandemic caused by COVID-19 has changed how our daily routine, which also changed the teaching and learning process. Studying from home versus the teacher to deal with the technology to fulfill the students' daily needs, and then also creating positive vibes in the online class. This condition makes the teacher needs to carefully adjust how to assess the students' performances online. So today's discussion is the continuation of yesterday's webinar. We have two keynote speakers yesterday. The first one is Professor Shankar with the title EFL Teaching and Assessment in the New Normal, and also our second speaker yesterday was Dr. Hisam with the title The Good, Bad, Ugly of COVID-19 and Its Impact on EFL. Let's create, innovate, and change. So for today, we're going to have two keynote speakers. The first one is Dr. Fahid Aryadus, and also the second one is Dr. Christian Adiputra. The first keynote speaker will be Dr. Fahid Aryadus. Before Dr. Fahid Aryadus will talk about his speech entitled Assessing Listening Comprehension, What and How, let me introduce him first. So Dr. Fahid Aryadus is an assistant professor in Language Assessment Literacy of English Language and Literature Academic Group in National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He is an associate director of the Global Listening Center and also a member of international associations such as American Association of Applied Linguistics, Applied Linguistic Association of Canada, Cognitive Science Society, and also International Listening Association. His research focuses on the application of latent variable models such as cognitive diagnostic assessment, structural equation modeling, and latent class model in language and educational assessment. Besides, Dr. Fahid provided consultation on language assessment projects such as Institute of Adult Learning in Singapore, Delta Project of Hong Kong, Paragon Testing Enterprises in Canada, and then the Learning Resource Network in London. Dr. Fahid is a member of advisory boards of Language Testing, Language Assessment Quarterly, Educational Psychology, and also Educational Assessment, and he serves as the associate editor of the International Journal of Language Testing. He has also co-authored multiple book chapters and books published by Routledge, Cambridge University Press, Springer, Cambridge Scholar Publishing, Wiley Blackwell, and etc. So, before I allow Dr. Fahid Aryadus to deliver his speech, I would like to remind all of you to please please mute this your voice so that when Dr. Fahid Aryadus deliver his speech, everyone can hear his voice clearly. And also, please don't forget like and also subscribe our YouTube channel for those who cannot join in our Zoom webinar. So for Dr. Fahid Aryadus, time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, Afisa. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Vahid Aryadus from National Institute of Education of Nanyang Technological University. I'm delighted to be here today with you, and I would be talking about the assessment of listening in a bit. Yes, as Fista mentioned, and as you all know, our world is now facing a very weird and bizarre situation, something that we have never experienced perhaps in our lifetime. So we are now trying to come up with new methods of teaching and especially assessment. I say especially because that's my field of research. So without any further ado, I would like to start my presentation. I think I need to share my slides with you. So let me see if I can get it started. Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me go to slideshow mode. Okay, so my presentation is about assessing listening comprehension, what and how. It's basically an introduction to the assessment of listening with focus on theory, the theory of listening assessment. At the end of the talk, I will also mention a few words about using new technologies, especially in this time, that we need, we need to move on from the usual physical teachings and assessment to a different mode of assessment and teaching. I think using some mobile and computer-assisted technologies would be of help. So I will present something on that. Like I said, I would like to start off by talking about theory. Those of you who know Richard Feynman, who was a physicist, you have probably also read this statement. This might be a Richard Feynman statement because some people think that it's not. But it says, what I cannot create, I do not understand. Actually, you can flip it around and say, what I don't understand, I cannot create. And that actually refers here, I would like to use it to refer to the assessment of listening comprehension. What I would like to say is that you, in order to be able to create listening assessments or listening tests, we must first understand what listening is, and then move on from that understanding to devising the listening comprehension tests. So I will spend a little bit of time to discuss listening theories and then listening constructs. And after that, I will move on to some of the basic principles of choosing texts for listening assessment. And then I'll move on to MAL or mobile assisted language learning, and of course, assessment. The main framework of the presentation is based on the test specification of Charles Allison's book called Assessing Reading, as you see in the left corner, bottom left corner. It's a test. It's a book on assessing reading, but I think it's equally applicable to listening comprehension. As you see, I have created a hexagon based on what he has presented in his book. This hexagon has 8 sides, starting from the purpose of the test. Then if you move clockwise, you will arrive at listening constructs and listening strategies. Actually, these two concepts are very interrelated and are kind of intertwined. So a lot of researchers do not discuss them as separate entities. For example, if you look at the theory of communicative competence, you would see that strategies like metacognitive and cognitive strategies are assumed to be a part of our language ability. So I will discuss these two at the same time. When we are talking about the listening construct, we need to take into consideration two possible threats to the validity of the tests. And these threats are actually, the discussion of these threats comes from Samuel Messick's work. One is the underrepresentation of the listening or other constructs that you want to measure. And the other one is the presence of construct irrelevant variance. Then I will very briefly talk about other aspects, including learners' characteristics, textual features, task features, expected responses, and scales. Now, what I would like to elaborate before I go on is this very interesting and I think important quotation from Charles Alderson. He said in the same book, what matters in the end is the extent to which we can generalize from assessment procedures or tests to listening, or in his word, reading, I just replaced it, listening performance in the real world situation or in the real world. And this is actually a definition of authenticity. Authenticity is actually the correspondence between the tasks or the tests that we develop and the actual language performance in the real world. So what we are developing, whether it's a listening test or reading test or anything else, it has to be a good representation of what happens in the language performance in the real world. So any sort of fanciful kind of test that doesn't correspond or doesn't relate to the real life situations is not an authentic test or has a kind of weak authenticity. Therefore, we need to take this into consideration in our test specifications. Now, the first thing that I mentioned in the previous slide was the purpose of listening assessment. I think it's an easy concept, so I don't spend too much time here. You know, sometimes we're tasked with developing a general language proficiency test in which we need to develop a listening proficiency test as well. Therefore, that test has the purpose of assessing listening proficiency of test takers. Now, sometimes we're asked to develop a test that represents oracy skills. The term oracy was for the first time used or maybe coined by Wilkinson in 1965, quite a few decades ago, but it still continues to be used. And what it actually means is listening and speaking. Then under this purpose, listening becomes one of the subcomponents of oracy. Sometimes we test the achievement of listening comprehension in a classroom, or we just want to really develop a quick quiz. That's an in-class assessment in our for our test, or we might want to develop a diagnostic test or a test for placement or anything else. Whatever we do, I believe that we should really note this down carefully and elaborate what I mean by, for example, being a placement test or being a diagnostic test or an in-class assessment or something else, because that will help us develop the specification and a definition of our construct. So let's say we have done this and we know what the purpose of our assessment is. What is the second stage? The second stage is construct representation, or the definition of listening, the definition of the listening construct that we want to measure. I think this analogy is helpful. On the left-hand side, you see this iceberg. I know the icebergs have been used, have been overused in different fields or in different presentations, but I think they continue to be very useful because what we see in a listening assessment or a listening test is the tip of the iceberg, and that's the test itself. But the test is built and devised upon a construct. That's something that we do not see immediately. It's not visible. So we need to dig into the test to find out what kind of construct it's measuring. And the construct itself is based on a theoretical framework or a theory of listening comprehension. Theories are sometimes used, the word theory is sometimes used interchangeably with model. I know that some people do not think that models and theories are the same. I think I'm not going to get into that debate because that's going to take a long time to talk about. But I think what we need to know is that a theory is different from a construct, in my view. Again, a lot of people, perhaps in language assessment, take these two as analogous or synonymous. I think they're not. And even Charles Alderson in his book also differentiates between construct and theory. So in my opinion, a theory is a body of knowledge that defines the mechanism or the phenomenon clearly, and also specifies the components of that mechanism or that phenomenon, and also their relationships, the relationships of those components. So it's like a broad representation of listening comprehension without, regardless of where that listening comprehension is taking place. A construct becomes more specific and more to the point, and it meaning that it actually defines that mechanism within a specific context for a particular group of people or test takers. And also, when we use the word construct, we actually mean that we want to measure that trait. Whereas when we say theory, the term or the concept of measurement is not implied. So if I say I'm developing a construct of listening, that means I'm developing something, some plan, some blueprint that helps me test or assess or measure, if you will, the listening ability. So throughout this presentation, I will use theory or construct wherever they're applicable. Then based on the construct, I develop the test. The process of changing a construct or translating a construct into a test is called operationalization. When we realize the construct, we generate or we develop a test. So let's see what we got under theories and constructs first, and then we can discuss tests. There are actually three groups of theories, two major ones, one eclectic. This is how I look into listening comprehension. Some other people might actually have a different opinion. So I have mentioned competency-based models. That's one thing. Two is the domain models. Actually, domain models can be operationalized into task-based constructs on the right-hand side. The task-based constructs are those that do not necessarily take into consideration the thought processes or the cognitive processes of test takers. Rather, what they focus on, what they care about, is what a language user can do. For example, if this person is able to communicate on a university campus, or if the person is able to communicate with his or her supervisor, or in meetings, or is he able to present something at a conference, etc. That's a kind of task-based definition of constructs. On the other hand, we have competency-based constructs, such as cognitive processes and sub-skill-based processes. There are two different types, in other words. What I would like to do is to focus on the competency-based models. The reason is, one is really a practical reason, that's at the interest of time. Two is that these two they seem to me to be the kind of more researched ideas in language assessment. So I would like to focus on these two specifically. Now, first, what is a cognitive process? And then how do we differentiate it from a sub-skill-based process kind of model, a sub-skill-based model? A cognitive process model assumes that there are certain cognitive processes that take place during listening that actually are executed in the mind. Or I have written here the brain continuously. Of course, in language assessment, the role of the brain has hardly been investigated. I personally prefer to use the brain because a lot of neuroscientists actually have argued that there is nothing called the mind, there's only the brain. That's a topic for a different presentation, maybe when COVID-19 is over. But in my opinion, I think the brain would be a better terminology to use. Anyway, whichever you use, the definition would be, I think, straightforward and easy to understand. It has to do with the processes that are executed in the brain continuously. How are these models or theories developed? They're typically based on cognitive interviews, if you look into the literature in language assessment or even language learning research. But in cognitive psychology, especially when it comes to reading comprehension research, you will see that a lot of experiments have been devised and designed to investigate the different cognitive processes of readers. I I like that approach, and I hope that one day this approach will also pick up in the field of language assessment. More recently, they have used other devices such as eye tracking, and I'm happy to say that my research team has been using brain scanning, a kind of brain scanning method called FNIRS, which stands for Functional Near Infrared Spectroscopy. These are the methods through which we can think about and investigate cognitive processes. What is a subskill-based model? Well, it has to do with the scores. Now, let me just give you a background quickly. Let's say you develop a test of listening comprehension, which consists of 40 test items. 40. You administer the test to a large group of people, let's say 500 people, or if you're lucky, 1,000 people, for a specific purpose. For example, you want to measure their proficiency in listening comprehension in English or a different language, like in Bahasa Indonesia or something else. Now, then you collect the data. That is the scores on each test item per person. For example, someone got a 0 on item 1, whereas another person got a 1, 0, 1, all the way. It's a dichotomous test, let's say. Now, a subskill-based approach would allow you to submit the scores to some quantitative data analysis. So it actually tries to reverse engineer from the scores the processes that test takers would probably, or the subskills that the test takers probably executed during listening comprehension. So it doesn't look directly into the mind or into the brain of the test taker, but it looks at their performance, the end product of their performance, and uses statistical analysis in order to model the variance in the data and basically find out whether there are subskills underlying that test performance or not. How does it work? I think a very good explanation or elaboration would be, let's say you have got 40 test items. In these 40 test items are submitted to exploratory fact analysis. And once it's done, then the results might be that you find that there are separate clusters of items. One cluster of item including 5 items, another cluster of items including, another cluster of items including, 10 items, another cluster including 6 items, and so on and so forth. You see that this technique reduces 40 items into, let's say, 4 clusters. Now, you go through the clusters of items through their contents to figure out if there is anything that connects or links these items. And then whatever you find through this content analysis or content processing is called a subskill. Therefore, the subskill-based approach starts from the data and cluster them, and then experts or professional test developers or teachers step in and read those clusters of items to figure out if there's anything that clusters the items together. So the whole idea is based on the concept of heterogeneity of variance. In other words, the fact that these items are clustered separately from one another shows that the variation of test scores and performance in one cluster is different enough, is sufficiently different from the variation of another cluster. Therefore, they are separable and disparate. Therefore, we have disparate and separable subskills. Now, each of these 2 models have been investigated in the literature of language assessment and language learning. I aim to provide a few examples, two examples to be specific, for cognitive process models, and maybe 4 or 5 examples for subskills-based models. The reason is that subskills-based models have been investigated more often. So here are the 2 examples of cognitive process models that help us understand what listening is. The first one is from Field 2008. It's a book, quite a useful one. It assumes that listening comprehension is is a continuous process which starts from input decoding and moves all the way up to discourse constructions. On the other hand, at the bottom of this slide, you will see three rectangles. One is surface level, text space level, and the other one is situation model. Well, these are the three major components of Walter Kinch construction integration model of comprehension. So I'm going to present them together because that will be more useful. So I can create a kind of mapping for both of these two models. And you'll see that they're quite closely related to each other. So the first model on top is the Fields model, which starts from input decoding, which is where listeners transform acoustic cues into groups of syllables. And that's when you hear them through your auditory senses, or that's your ears, you transmit the signals as electrical pulses all the way to the brain, to mostly the right and left side of the brain, and then you start to process them. The first part of the brain, or one of the first regions of the brain that is responsible for this analysis, is the inferior frontal gyrus, or IFG, which is right here in the left corner, in the left side of the brain, or some people on the right side of the brain. So the analysis or the processes is done there, and then syllables are figured out. Then the second stage would be a lexical search, where the listener tries to identify the best word level matches for those syllables, because it tries to decode them and recode them back into words. In order to recode them into words, the listener is supposed to retrieve the relevant information from the long-term memory, which mainly exists in our hippocampus, which is a subcortical area of the brain. Then following the lexical search, and of course, I would like to add another word here, lexical segmentation. That's where you your brain tries to segment the words, because as you are now listening to me, you don't see any spaces, or you don't hear any spaces between the words. It's the job of our brain to figure out separate words and then put them together. That's called lexical segmentation. During lexical segmentation, or like a very short period of time after lexical segmentation is done, meaning is attached by the brain. Meaning is attached to the word that has been segmented. Now, some scholars say that lexical segmentation and meaning association take place at the same time. Some people say that they are separate processes. I think that's a topic for another discussion. And after you figure out these separate words, you need to string them together. How do we string them together? We need another ability called syntactic ability. So we call upon our syntactic knowledge in order to be able to string together the words, a process which is called parsing. Actually, it's used in computer sciences as well. After parsing, we create, or during the parsing, we create sentences or representations of sentences in the mind or in the brain, if you will. These representations are in the form of propositions, and they are almost immediately converted into mental imagery, visual mental imagery, wherever it is possible. So those representations are not connected to each other yet. We have, for example, 20 representations of whatever we have heard. This is what Walter Kinch refers to as the text space. So a text space is a mental representation of the auditory message, which is not coherent yet, which doesn't have a very good and cogent structure. Now, what our brain starts to do is to identify those gaps within the text space and try to eliminate the gaps, that is filling in the gaps, by using our world knowledge, by using experiences that we have accumulated, and anything that we actually know, our opinions, our beliefs, and so on and so forth. This process is called top-down processing. That's a process through which we add things to to the passage which do not actually exist in the passage itself. Therefore, this top-down processing could be quite different from person to person. The output of this reprocessing of the text space is a more coherent and cogent representation, which we refer to as the situation model. This is actually something that Kinch has mentioned in his construction integration model of comprehension. So the situation model is that representation, the cogent and coherent representation of the passage, which actually means or includes whatever we have understood from the passage. Now, one of the important takeaways from these two models for assessment or even for teaching listening comprehension is that we need to focus our attention on the assessment of the situation model. That's whatever they have learned, rather than the assessment of words or, I don't know, syllables and so on and so forth. Actually, the stage from input all the way through parsing is the pre-comprehension stage. The comprehension stage starts from meaning construction and all the way to discourse construction. So if we want to measure listening or assess listening comprehension, we want to focus on these two stages with the primary focus on the situation model itself. Now let's move on to the idea of sub-skills. As you saw in the cognitive processing analysis, the cognitive processing configuration of listening comprehension, things move linearly things have been represented that way, but of course they're not really linear. They could get really non-linear. But the thing is, we often do not have that clear-cut boundaries in a real-life situation. Things happen, in a blink of an eye, and we understand things quite online. So we're talking about a process there. But when it comes to sub-skill-based models, we're not anymore dealing with the process. We're dealing with some components which are multi-divisible, some skills. So that idea of continuity and the idea of process is not there anymore in sub-skill-based models. So what matters here is the size of the grain. Should the grain be coarse or fine? And what do I mean by that? It really means the size of the sub-skills. If you look at, and I will show you in a second, if you look at some of these frameworks or models, you will see that the listening comprehension has been divided into multiple small sub-skills. On the other hand, there are models that do not break them down into so many sub-skills. They just break them down into a few coarse-grained sort of sub-skills. And I think that's probably more measurable. It lends itself to measurement more than if you try to break them down into like a million different kind of sub-skills. Here, I would like to start off by providing this basic sub-skill model. Actually, I put this together based on my understanding of the available literature. If you guys are interested to, for example, develop one, you can also develop one for yourself. But you need to take into consideration whom you are developing this model for. Like, are you developing it for measuring kids in primary school or for secondary school? Things can be different depending on who this model is for. And I have examples to show you later. At the bottom of this hierarchy, that's level 1, you have the sub-skill of the identification of sounds and prosody and prosodic patterns. Then as you move up to the top side of this hierarchy, these sub-skills presumably get more difficult to execute or to master. For example, level 2 is comprehending vocabulary, but if you jump to level 6, it's the ability to identify attitudes, views, opinions. For example, the ability to figure out whether someone is being sarcastic or does he really mean it when he says something. And that's not a skill purely based on the vocabulary, but it's a skill based on your understanding of vocabulary, intonation, gesture, facial expressions, and so on and so forth, and the context in which you are located. So it's probably a more sophisticated sort of sub-skill than like number 3, for example, the ability to understand phrases and sentences. Okay, so I'm going to move on and show you one of the first models that was proposed by Richards, Jack Richards. You've probably heard his name. He actually has written quite a lot on language learning. This is one of the first models that he proposed, sub-skill-based model of comprehension. He used the word macro skills and micro skills, which I think implies similar concepts. As you see, there are 16 just in this slide. Actually, there's a lot more to that. You can go to the paper and read from pages 229 to 239. You'll see a long list of sub-skills. It has been critiqued because scholars who read it believe that it's anecdotal, meaning that you don't have rigorous scientific or quantitative evidence to support the existence and separation of these sub-skills from each other. And actually, there is a large range here. So I would say that it could be a useful heuristic for teachers. For example, if you look at number 1, which is the ability to identify purposes and scopes of a lecture, and compare it with just randomly, let's say, number 16, the ability to recognize instructional and learner tasks, such as warnings, recommendations, advice, and instructions, you'll get a good idea that there is a wide range of situations and conditions in which listening takes place. So as a teacher, you might want to expose your students to lecture comprehension, to understanding a conversation in which recommendations are being made, advice is being given to someone, instructions are given, and so on and so forth. Now, another sub-skill model that I would like to present is the one that was quantitatively validated. I did this study in 2018. I used quite a few quantitative models. I compared them. If you're interested to know more about the models, I'm happy to talk about it after the talk is over. But just to mention that the model is called cognitive diagnostic model or cognitive diagnostic analysis. So I identified 9 test items. 9 sub-skills within 40 or 30. I don't exactly remember. I think it was 30 test items, 9 sub-skills. Some of the test items actually were designed to measure more than one sub-skill based on my observations. For example, the first one is the ability to eliminate inaccurate information. And as you read this, you would know that this is very test specific, because in real life conversations, we might not have to do this a lot. I mean, it depends on how you define authenticity and the TLU domain, that's the target language use domain. The ability to make paraphrases, the ability to make pragmatic inferences, and so on and so forth. So 9 sub-skills emerged in this study, whereas in this second study, which was conducted 3 years before that, 5 sub-skills emerged, but this is a different condition and situation. The previous study was a study of listening comprehension in secondary schools in Singapore. This one is a proficiency test of test takers who apply to universities in North America. They have to take some proficiency tests, for one of which is the MILAB, Michigan English Language Assessment Battery. So this test was actually designed by Michigan Language Assessment. And we found out, together with my co-author, Professor Go, we found out that there were 5 sub-skills, including understanding and responding to the unexpected statements, understanding details and explicit statements, making close paraphrases, understanding making 2 types of paraphrases, inferences, propositional and enabling inferences. And here is how we did it, because I have been talking about factor analysis and quantitative models in sub-skill based research. So this is one kind of factor analysis. It's a confirmatory factor analysis, actually. So we use a software package called Lizral, as you see in this slide. The image that emerged was quite interesting, because we realized that the listening comprehension, which as tested by MILAB, could not only be divided into those 5 subskills, but also these 5 subskills have a higher order listening factor that causes them, that contributes to the variation in them. So what is the implication of this analysis for the test developer, or for you if you're doing or designing a similar test? What it means is, look, the scores can be given to the students, can be reported to students in 2 ways. Form 1, you can provide them with a holistic score, like your score is 90, for example, out of 100, or 70 out of 100. And that's the listening construct right in the left-hand side of this figure. Now, you can also break it down into sub-skills or sub-scores. You say, okay, you got a 70 in your listening, and also your ability to understand explicit information is this, your ability to understand implicitly stated information is this, and so on and so forth. So this becomes like a kind of diagnostic information that you can provide your students with. Unless you have evidence that your test can be broken down into sub-skills, it's not advisable to provide sub-scores, because those sub-scores do not make much sense.
Okay, Dr. Fahim, I'm sorry for interrupting. You still have 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. Now, one more slide here is the upper primary secondary school syllabus in Singapore. You can see that they have specified sub-skills here. For example, understanding gist, details, inferences, the purposes of listening, make the ability to make prediction, and anticipating the input, etc. Another one is PSLE, which is a high-stakes test in Singapore, which is basically based around literal and inferential comprehension and the ability to draw conclusions and understanding main ideas, details, etc. And the difficulty, in my view, increases as you go from 1 to 3. Now, the other one is the ordinary O-level listening. As you see, the construct has been spelled out in this document like this. They talk about, if you look at section A, they talk about listening skills, then they talk about the different types of texts. That's the second factor. And also they talk about the different types of items. That's the third factor. So on top of sub-skills, which they haven't actually explicitly stated what kind of sub-skills they mean, on top of that, they have types of texts and types of questions or items. And now the question is, so after reading and listening to you talking about so many models, so what should we do? How should we test listening comprehension? I would say this model by Gary Buck is really useful, which is called the default listening construct. He says when you don't have a good idea what to measure with your test or what to assess, you can start from a default listening construct and then expand it according to the needs of your classroom or beyond classroom assessments. So one thing to consider is to consider the use of extended samples of realistic spoken language. The other thing is that you should create items that test understanding linguistic information, and also create items that test understanding inferred meanings or the ability to make inferences. I think it's a good idea to, if you really want to develop tests in listening, it's a good idea to read Gary Buck's book. In a recent code citation analysis, we found that Gary Buck's book, although it was published in 2001, it continues to be the most influential textbook in language assessment, specifically in the assessing of listening comprehension. So it's a good idea to have a copy of this book. Okay, this is one example of using this default listening construct by Elvis Wagner. He used the default construct to investigate what some test items actually measure. If you're interested to look at the paper, it's useful. I just wanted to mention about textual features in listening as well, because you need to choose a text for assessing listening. You need to look into the speech rates, pauses between ideas, familiar if the pronunciation is familiar or not, natural intonation, because some texts are actually read by machines. And these days you probably hear that a lot. And some of these machines do not have a natural intonation, so it might be very difficult for some students to understand that. Whether there's complex grammar and so on and so forth. In the interest of time, I have to go through this. Just wanted to mention that finally you can use Cometrics. Cometrics is ability assessor to also get an idea about the difficulty level of the text that you choose for your students. There are 5 measures that Cometrics Disability Assessor can provide you with, including narrativity, syntactic simplicity, word concreteness, referential, and deep cohesion. But provides you with some percentage. Okay, so one last thing. I hope, Fisa, you can just give me 2 more minutes, because it's really cool and interesting to know. So all of us have got mobiles, right? Well, there is one field of research in computer-assisted language learning called mobile-assisted language learning, or MAL for short. What I'm suggesting is that you can do some part of your formative assessments or even teaching of listening comprehension through MAL, mobile-assisted language learning. Why is it so? One of the advantages of MAL is its mobility across time and across space. Look, learners can carry, and they do carry their mobiles. Actually, it's so ubiquitous, it's so universal that you cannot imagine someone walking without his phone in his hand, looking at it, or in his pocket. So learners carry it around. There are different mobile technologies that are emerging every day, and you can just install them on your phone and carry them around with you. And also the content. You can download everything from the cloud onto your phone, or as you're walking, just connect to the cloud, for example, on YouTube or any other software kind of software, and listen to something and learn something. Therefore, flexibility, continuity, accessibility, and adaptability, according to Lowen and the colleagues, are some of the most important advantages that MAL offers to us. In one word, MAL is a flexible, continuing, adaptive language learning process with easy access to language learning materials supported by mobile devices. And one last thing, I promise this is the last thing.
Okay.
So you might be asking if MAL has ever been applied to listening comprehension and reading research as well. I also review research into reading because it's closely related to listening. In reading, it's a lot more, as you see on the left part of the screen. On listening, on the right side, well, it's relatively less. It's good news and bad news. Bad news because what we know about the application of MAL in listening research is limited. But it's good news because there's a lot of research gap out there for us. And if you're interested in researching listening comprehension, there's a lot of research questions waiting for you. So these studies that I have cited, actually, Kathy, my MA student, has created these 2 slides for me with very special thanks to her. These show that multimodal learning is ubiquitous, is around us, and it seems to be an kind of effective way for enhancing learning motivation and achievements. It has been shown in the study of listening. And I hope that you'll consider using your students and yourself, your own phones, in the assessment and teaching of listening comprehension in one way or another. There are many apps out there. You can use those apps, especially given that we are facing this so-called new normal. We must become more innovative with the devices that we are using. So this brings me to the end of this presentation. These are some of the references, or perhaps all the references that I've used. If you have any questions, more references. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer if I can. And if you have suggestions, I'd be very happy to hear them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Fahid Aryadus, for interesting presentation. So I saw here in question and answer section there are quite some question here,
Okay.
It's about 7 or 8 questions. So the first one, I'm going to read it for you.
Okay.
So it's from Pak Ujang Suparwan. He's from Lampung University. His question is how to integrate higher order thinking skills or HOTS into listening assessment.
Higher order skills. If you could, because this terminology has been used differently by different people. By that, do you mean critical thinking or just top-down processing? Can the person elaborate on this? Can the person who asked the question?
Sorry, Pak Ujang Suparman. He's here. Wait.
So I just tried to provide a quick answer here. If you mean higher order thinking, if you mean things like critical thinking and all that, yes, actually I recommend that you read Walter Kinch's book and writing on the construction integration model. It's very important to engage students in those skills, basically by, for example, crafting questions that ask students to identify the opinions and attitudes of the speaker, or whether, for example, one speaker is being sarcastic or not. That's if you're crafting multiple choice questions and discrete point test items. But I think a better way would be to integrate listening with other language skills. For example, integrate listening with reading and writing. Allow the students to read a text and to listen to another text, which probably talks about a different idea than what the reading passage said, and then require them to integrate these two different opinions, which were transmitted through different modalities. I think this will be a very good way of engaging students in some higher order thinking.
Okay, so Pak Ujang.
Right.
Okay.
Hi. Okay. Thanks for the question. Yeah. I hope I answered.
All right, it's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move to the second question. So we have quite a lot of questions, but we still have time. So I'm going to read another question for you.
No problem.
So it's for anonymous attendee. I don't know what's his name or her name. So his question is, which one of model that you have explained is appropriate and effective for assessing listening skills for students in university level?
At the university level, I think, well, it really depends. If you want to provide them with diagnostic feedback, I would say a sub-skill-based model would be more useful. But if you're interested in just investigating, some research, like to figure out what is happening in the mind of a good listener versus in the mind of a listener who's not very effective, then I think a cognitive-based process approach or cognitive process approach would be more suitable there. It depends on the purposes, like I said at the start of the presentation. I personally use cognitive process models quite a lot because I often use them for research purposes. I find that they are very useful for me. But if I were to provide diagnostic feedback to my students in class, I would most likely use a sub-skill-based approach there, because that will be a lot more useful for me.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fahid, for the explanation. Last question. I saw this is the last one. Okay, so the last question. Yeah, one last question. Okay. So this is from Zainuddin Hasibuan. Okay. He would like to ask you about anaphoric move text. How can we make anaphoric move text can be better in listening skill itself, so it can be more enjoyable for the students?
Oh, anaphoric movements, I think, has been researched quite a little bit in cognitive psychology, and it's one of the many processes that happens in listening comprehension. When you hear something right now, for example, the word this or that or the man or the woman or something like that, then you have to link it back to a reference that you had heard before. For example, the table was like that, and this was, so this and table are related. I don't know how to make it joyful, really, because it's one of the many things that probably goes through the brain of a person who's listening to someone. I would say you can look at it from a broader perspective, and to make listening more joyful for them, you can require them to listen to some text that they would probably love. If they're young learners, and if they're interested in football, for example, football matches, you can find some suitable, for example, interview or conversation between, a famous football player and someone else, and ask them to listen to it. I think that would be more interesting than just if we focus on one of the many things like anaphora or cataphoric movements or anaphoric movements. So I think the main question for me would be the topic. Choosing the right topic at the right level of difficulty for the students, rather than those nitty-gritty things. Okay. If you just want to make it more interesting to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the topic it is, if you want to make the students interested more, so we need to focus on the topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Actually, we still have more question here, but the time is not enough. If you still, want to ask Dr. Fahid, maybe later on, you can send him message through email so that Dr. Fahid will answer your question. And then also, Dr. Fahid has a YouTube channel. You may like and then also subscribe his YouTube channel. It's very useful for you, especially for the English teacher and also the English language researcher. And then before we move to another second speaker, do you have any closing message, Dr. Fahid, before we move to Christian?
Not really. Thank you very much. I like to thank you and your colleagues, Dr. Ari and everyone, for the invitation. It's been a pleasure. And I really hope that this so-called new normal will blow over soon and we can meet in person. I can come back to Lampung and eat the delicious food and go back to the zoo and see that talking bird again. I hope the talking bird is still there. Yeah, let's hope that. And since you just mentioned the YouTube channel, actually, I'm going to provide the link here in the chat box. I just provided that. I mean, if anyone is interested, I mean, there are quite a lot of videos there about statistics, about language assessment, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, okay. So for the attendees and the participant, if you want to get lots of things from Dr. Fahid Aryadus, you can just click his YouTube channel and then like and then subscribe his YouTube channel. Okay, thank you for Dr. Fahid Aryadus.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to move to the next speaker. It's Dr. Christian Adiputra. So, Dr. Christian Adiputra, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
So, okay. So, are you ready?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, okay. So, before Dr. Christian will deliver his speech, I'm going to show you his slides. This one, wait a minute. Okay, so this is Dr. Christian Adiputra. Dr. Christian Adiputra got his bachelor degree from the Department of English Language Education, University of Lampung in 2010. He is now working as an assistant professor of applied linguistics at the Department of English Language Education, Universitas 11 Maret, Indonesia, and at the Deanship of Preparatory Year, Prince Satam bin Abdul Aziz University, Saudi Arabia. Prior to that, he worked as an Indonesian language and culture instructor at the University of Montana, United States. He got his master's and doctoral degree in second language acquisition and teaching from the University of Arizona, United States. Before he started his graduate study in 2012, he had taught English in different settings in Bandar Lampung, Indonesia, from primary schools to college, as well as in formal and informal education settings for 6 years. His research and teaching interests include internet technology, enhanced second language teaching and learning, second language teacher education, and indigenous youth multilingualism and critical digital literacies. In his free time, he enjoys traveling with his family and friends. Okay. Going to stop share this one. Okay, so before we start, Dr. Christian to have his keynote speech, I want to remind all of you once again, the participant, because our limit space and Zoom, so that not all of the participants can join in Zoom. So all of you can still, join the webinar through our YouTube channel. Can you please like and also subscribe our YouTube channel? Both of the participants from the YouTube channel and also the Zoom can get the e-certificate at the end of the session. Okay, so Dr. Christian, are you ready?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, time is yours.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just share the desktop and then share. All right, can you see my slide now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Clear.
All right.
Full screen, yeah.
Oh, okay, full screen.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so hello everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Rafista, for the generous introductions, and also for all the committee for the invitations, and also for the warm welcome that you have given to me. Undoubtedly, as an alumnus, it always was wonderful to be back home and to share my experience with colleagues in Lampung, because I can meet my lecturers, and then my teachers, my seniors, my juniors, and also very often my students. So I'm really, really excited for this opportunity. All right, so today I'm going to share about the future of second language writing classrooms in the so-called post-pandemic world, or the new normal world, from my perspective as a second language writing instructor in the last couple of years. All right, so today this will be my plan. I'm going to try to answer 3 simple questions, which I hope it can cover the issues that we are dealing with today. So number 1, what have we learned during this pandemic? And then question number 2 is, how will this pandemic, including what we have learned so far, affect the future of our second language writing classroom teaching practice? And then finally, question number 3 is, how do we know to what extent our students have learned in our writing classrooms? All right, now let's start with the first questions. What have we learned during this pandemic? All right, I think most of us now have an experience of teaching our classes online. So regardless of all the obstacles, for example, additional expense that we need to allocate for data, unstable internet connection sometimes, and then the complexity of the transition from face-to-face classroom to teaching virtually from home, especially if you have, like, for example, 3 kids, and then they're also studying from home, and then at the same time you have also to teach. So it's really complex. But it actually also gives us an opportunity to finally learn various online teaching applications. So I have a belief that in the last 3 months, each of us has really learned a lot. We learned about teleconferencing applications such as Google Meet and Zoom. We learned about learning management system applications such as Google Classroom, Edmodo, Blackboard, Schoology, and many things that you can tell. And then, of course, there are a lot more learning applications such as Kahoot, Quizlet, that you have practically used them to teach your students in your classrooms. So, and then we also have an opportunity to finally learn about how to develop teaching materials for online courses. So if in the conventional face-to-face classroom, we usually use a textbook and also a student's workbook, or we call it LKS. Now we are challenged to try to create a video, a handout, and a worksheet in Microsoft Word or PDF that we can easily share on the screen for our students during the teleconferencing sessions. So I know, for example, one colleague from chemistry department at the University of Lampung, and then he shared the videos that he created every time he is teaching. So it's like, oh wow, you're becoming so creative. And then he said like, yes, it's what I'm learning during this pandemic. All right, and then we also learn how to teach online. So it's practically the same as teaching in the conventional face-to-face classroom. So we are thinking of what we need to do for pre-activity, while activity, and post-activity. But it is in virtual setting. So we are challenged to think again about how to make our students motivated and engaged, because physically we don't see each other in the classrooms, but this is virtually. So, but the most important part is that how we can make sure that students are also learning something in our classrooms. And then finally, we also learn how to assess our students online. So this is not only about administering the tests, but also creating the tests and finding the right platform to do it, such as Google Form and then link.com. I believe some of you have been familiar with this one. But we are also challenged actually to think again about how to avoid students from cheating, because this is actually very easy for students to do that if they do it online. So I hope I can cover some of this point in today's sessions, particularly in the last 2 points. Okay, but in general, this is really the time for us actually to integrate the 3 knowledge that we have so far. Namely, so if you can see this picture, namely pedagogical knowledge, such as methodology of teaching, and then content knowledge, such as the knowledge of grammar, vocabulary, text, and language skills. And finally, the technological knowledge, such as how to operate a computer, how to operate a laptop, how to operate your mobile phone, and then also how to access internet. So this is what we call a TPEC, so technological pedagogical content knowledge, one of the essential requirements of being a more professional teacher in this era. But finally, what I want to highlight in this part is that every time we are teaching and planning to integrate the use of technology in our classroom, we need to create our lesson plan first, and then after that, we can find the tools that will be helpful for the lessons, not the other way around. In other words, we focus actually on the technology, we focus on the pedagogy and the content first, and then after that, the use of technology can be integrated to facilitate the learning process. All right, and then after that, I think this pandemic has also made us more aware of the need for continuous teacher professional development. So I think I will do a lot of click after this. Now during the summer break, we also have more time to reflect on how we can teach our students much better in our classrooms for next semester. So the question is that, what have we done to do it so far? And what do we need to do to continue? All right, so I think I will go from here. Okay, and then number one, I think many of us have done it, including myself. So before the class, I usually try to search for some ideas in Google, including possible tools that I integrate in my lesson. It's very simple. For example, just type like this in Google, ideas to teach descriptive text, and then you write tech tools. And then finally, you will find a lot of ideas to tech tools. For example, oh, this one looks good. 10 ideas for using technology to teach writing. And then there you go. You will have a lot of ideas, and then some suggestions from the website. So, and then we will get a lot of information about this in the website, and then we will also find some tech tools that we might be using for our classes. I will also recommend you to check this one. This is also interesting, checking the website that you can use for your classes, for example. So this is one of my favorite because it has a lot of information about tools and also ideas. So for example, tools and ideas. So there you go. So when you are teaching, it's already in there. Tech tools for language teaching and educators. So when you are teaching speaking, then there are some tools that you might try to check and then, try out. And then if it is relevant for your classes, then you probably can do it in your classes. And then if you are teaching writing, you can also use this: Story Jumper, Book Creator, Pixton, MakeBeliefsComics.com, and many others, interactive videos, brainstorming, and some others. So this is one of my favorite websites that I usually access to teach in my classroom. All right. All right, and then I'll move on to number 2, sharing with my colleague. So recently, I have an intense communications with some colleagues who are now teaching English in Bandar Lampung. They sent me the screen capture of WhatsApp group of English teachers at the school. So I think it's really wonderful the way WhatsApp is used for sharing teaching ideas, sharing information about upcoming webinars, and more importantly, also for supporting and comforting each other, especially during this challenging time. So I think if you haven't created one for your school, I will encourage you to do this, as it is very important for teachers to learn from each other. And then number 3, participating in a lot of webinars. So if you have noticed, there are a lot of institutions such as Universitas Lampung, like what we are doing today, Universitas 11 Maret, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, and then some other universities in some countries. Recently, I have seen Thammasat University and also Chulalongkorn University. They are very active, offering free webinars for English language teachers. So, and also a lot of language teaching associations, such as in Indonesia, we know TEFLIN, we know ITEL, and then we know TESOL in the US, and then Eurocall in Europe, and then ITEFL in UK. And there are a lot of teaching associations that we can try to check, as well as publishers like Cambridge University Press, Oxford University Press, also offer free webinar sessions that we can join. What we need to do is actually to frequently check their websites and social media to keep updated about what will come next. I also try to follow some big names and frequent speakers in Facebook, including Fahid in LinkedIn. So, for example, in Facebook, I become friends with Dr. Willy Renandia, and then Dr. Gumawang Jati, and then Dr. Nur Arifah Derajati from Universitas 11 Maret, Dr. Professor Joko Nurkanto from Universitas 11 Maret, including Stephen Crescent, and then some other big names in the field of second language acquisition and teaching. So it's really interesting because they are frequent speakers, and then sometimes they share the webinars that where they will be speaking in those webinars, and then we can actually join from them too. So it's really great if you can follow them and then become their friends in social media, because we can keep up to date with what is going to happen next. All right, and then number 4, I think I will try to highlight about the role to optimize the role of professional learning communities at our institutions. So what I want to highlight here is the importance of an institutions like school, campus, to maintain and upgrade the quality of their teachers and lecturers. So especially during this remote teaching transition. But it should ideally be done continuously, not only during this time. For example, by periodically inviting some expert to the school to share some new teaching ideas, or by delegating some teachers to take part in some conferences. After that, they come back to the school and they can share what they have learned at the webinar or conferences to their colleagues at the school. And then finally, I will encourage you to join professional associations such as TESOL, ITEFL, TEFLIN, Eurocall, and many others. At least you can join their social media. For example, I joined the ITEL Telegram group. I will show you. This is really interesting. And then this is from ITEL. And then because they keep updated about what they are going to do, so it's really interesting to see. Okay, I think I'm going to show you. So this is, for example, one of the webinars that they recently did. So we study about coping with limited bandwidth WhatsApp to facilitate learning activities, and then technology in extensive listening and viewing, emergency remote teaching using WhatsApp and emojis. And then they actually update it. So for example, this will be in 15 June. So this yesterday, 18 June 2020. So this is 2 more days. Strategi dalam melaksanakan pembelajaran daring. So there are a lot of informations that we can get from group like this. And then I think I will also show you this one. I think it's also wonderful if we can join some group in Facebook, especially because in Facebook some big names in the field of language teaching are really active. This is one of the group that I joined, Technology for Language Teaching and Learning, and then people there frequently share a lot of interesting information about webinar, about teaching tools, and also discussion that is talking about what is happening in the classrooms. And then one of the most important thing is that there are a lot of big names in the field. For example, this is Professor Jonathan Reinhardt. He is one of the big names in the field of technology in second language learning, and then he is also active in the discussion in this group. And then you can also join other group, for example, second language writing, that is initiated by Dr. Paul K. Masuda from Arizona State University. And there are also other big names in the group, including Dr. Willy Rendia. So this is really really interesting. And so I think I'll go back. So this is also interesting. Circle Center for Educational Resources in Culture, Language, and Literacy. So they have also some webinars that we can also participate. So I think this is one of the things that I want to ask you to do. Our institutions need to provide us with teacher professional development sessions. However, we also need to self-initiate it, because we need to do it to make us a better teacher. So that's, I think, the message that I want to try to send you in this slide. All right. I think now we can move on to the second questions. How will this pandemic affect the future of our second language writing classroom teaching practices? All right. Well, I think the class will be either fully online or blended or hybrid. So yesterday we have heard from Pak Nadiem Makarim, the Minister Nadiem Makarim, that next semester all campus will be online, but school will be either blended or will be either blended learning or fully conventional classroom teaching. But one thing for sure is that students' learning process will not only take place during the class, but also before and also after the class. So what we have to do as teacher is that we need to think about what students really need to do before the class, during the class, and also after the class. Because that's the idea of flipped learning activities. The way we can facilitate the students to learn more after the class session ends or before the class session started. All right, and then after that, we also need to equip students with relevant skill to become an independent, autonomous, and also long life learners. I think I will show you this one. This is what I usually do in my classes. So in Saudi Arabia, in every semester, students and I will meet for 10 weeks. So I will divide the folder into 10 weeks, like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then week 10. And then I have seen that some of you are also using Google Classrooms. That is interesting. And then the question is that how we actually organize this learning management system so that, we can really maximize it so that students can do the idea of flipped learning. So continuously learning, not only in the classroom, but also at home. So what I try to do is that every week I meet three times with my students on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So in Saudi Arabia, the holiday is on Friday and Saturday, and then on Sunday we go to the office to work. So this is what I usually do. On Sunday, I will divide it into three folders. So the first folder is I usually upload the video of. So let's say at that day I will explain about descriptive text. So I will record myself and then I will tell the students about descriptive text, or I can find any video in YouTube and then upload it there. And then after that I will also upload like 2 or 3 pages handout for students to read. And also we can add some practices so that students can do it. And then after that I will also upload. Okay. And then after that, I will, in the second folder, this is what students need to do in the classroom. So I will upload the slide and also the worksheet. So during the class, the students can also download the slide and also worksheet that I will use. And then after that, we also need to provide materials for enrichment activities. So let's say it can be discussion. So we can do it, for example, if we want to have discussions, we just can add discussions, and then we can write the thread and then ask the students to answer it after the class. We can also ask the students, for examples, create a project or something like that. So that is what I usually do in the classrooms with my students. And this is also examples that I do in my graduate course in Universitas 11 Maret. This is called Language Planning and Policy. And then what I always try to do is I ask the students to watch a required video and then read required reading. And then the students who are going to present, they will read article for presentations. And then they will also do voice thread presentations. I think I'll try to elaborate voice thread presentation later in the sessions. And then after that, so this is basically what they are going to do before the class. This is during the class, and then discussion, further readings, additional resources. This is something that they can do after the class. So that is the thing that you need to think about when you are designing online classes. So think about what students can do before the class, during the class, and after the class. So that is the idea of flipped learning. And then we also need to equip students and with relevant skill to become independent, autonomous, and long life learners. So for examples in in this class, this is article writing class that I taught, I guess, in the fall 2019. I spent like one day just to teach the students some tools that the students can use at home. So, for example, okay, I need to. Oh, okay, I can do it. Okay, so for examples, Google Scholar, because that's important. So the project in this class is actually article writing. So they are asked to write a journal article. So that is quite challenging. And then I asked the students, okay, so on the first day of the class, I taught them how to use Google Scholar and also Scopus to find a good articles. And then after that, I taught them about Purdue Online Writing Lab. So this is how they can learn how to make how they can make like citations, how can they synthesize, and also so quote, cite, and also synthesize. And then Google Docs. I taught them how to use Google Docs so they can collaborate in Google Docs, even though they are not physically in the same class. They're at home, they're in different places, but they still can collaborate. And then I also taught them about how to use Turnitin, because this is important. So students, when you don't cite correctly and then you put it inside the Turnitin, it can detect that you plagiarize. So they are becoming more aware of how to synthesize, of how to cite, of how to quote correctly because of the teaching of these tools. And then I also teach them how to use Grammarly so that they can be aware of the grammatical mistake, punctuations, and then things like that. So this is what I taught at the beginning of the classes. So then, every time they feel like, oh, okay, I think I have some issues with my grammar, and then I will try to check in Grammarly so that I can see which one that needs to be corrected. So that's I think the thing that we need to teach to our students. To our students when we are teaching writing. Okay, and then after that, the next point, I guess, there will be more creative and collaborative learning practices. What does it mean? So I think there will be more interactions between teacher and students, between student and student, and also between student and public. I will show it shortly after this. And student will also support each other in a collaborative project, especially if we are working with Google Docs, using Google Docs. And then students will learn from each other and reflect on what they are doing by looking at what other people are doing. So for examples, I will try to show you this one. Okay, I think I will try to close this. Okay, so usually in my writing class, I will try to use, Okay, in my writing class, I usually use Google Drive and also Google Docs. And then every student can see other students writing. The first idea is that they will try to see what other people have done, and then they will learn from each other. But of course, they cannot edit other students' work. But after they can see each other works, I will give them access to at least 2 or 3 students, so that they can check their friends' work. So to do peer feedback, I will give them like rubrics, and then I ask them, okay, now please try to check your friends' work and then give them feedback. And then after that, I also ask them, now please try to give your friends feedback on grammar. So things like that. So, and then after that, they will really work. They will try to look from each other works, and then finally they do reflections on how to make their own paper better. So that's the thing. So this is for examples that students have done last semester in the classrooms. All right, and then the next thing that I want to show you is the use of voice thread. Okay. Oh, all right. So I think this is not in this course. Wait. I think I will show you the use of voice thread. Oh, or maybe I will try to skip this one first, and then I can go to this one. There you go. I have already here. This is from the voice thread. So usually I will ask the students, usually after in the midterm, when they have finished their writing their proposal finished, and then they try to present it using the voice thread, and then other students can also comment and so give suggestions about what other students have done in the class. All right, just wait shortly, and then this is interesting applications because it can be integrated in our learning management system. If you use Blackboard, if you use Schoology, I believe you can integrate it here. I believe Google Classroom also have integrated facilities for voice chat. All right, so here.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello guys, my name is Yasinta Oktira Putri Utar.
So when you see it here, this Yasinta is actually presenting what he is doing in his writing class. And then after that, other students like Yunia, why do you choose this topic? And then SA, can you tell me the reason why you choose this topic? So some students try to ask the questions, and then the students try to answer. This is basically something that is authentic, reflective, and also meaningful activities that we can integrate in writing classroom. Because in real life, when we are working as an academia, we are writing papers, and then at the end, we are also presenting. So this is the thing that I usually try to ask to my students so that they can get feedback from their classmates, and then they try to revise it in their paper. All right. And then the next thing that I will try to show you, something that is fun and meaningful. Sometimes I ask my student, especially in lower level, to write descriptive text, and then I ask them to describe something, to explain about a certain things. And then what I have done is that using Instagram. So I asked them to use hashtag, for example, B2EED19, because this is the name of the class. And then let's try to see one of them as the example. So this one. All right. So she actually explained about what she did during the weekend during this pandemic. Before the coronavirus hit the world, sometimes I visit my cuteness, and after coronavirus comes, I still visit and play with her. I would say to you guys that we have to take advantage of this time to do positive things, although the pandemic make our days hard. The relationship between all people surround us might tighter and tighter, like my relationship with my first prettiness. Actually, she is always kicking me and then after that, the students will use some hashtag, and then some students will comment, ask questions, and then really interesting. So the comment will not only come from their classmates, will not always come from me, but also from their friends. And this task is authentic, and then they just can take picture and then upload it, and then make a description of this one, something that is related to their life. So this is an example of personalizing the activities in the classroom with what students have in their daily life. And then I also ask them to put other hashtag, for example, my weekend or stay at home. So what I will do as the follow-up in the classroom, usually, I will ask them to check, for example, stay at home. And then if they click stay at home, there you go. There will be some pictures that other people are using with the stay at home hashtag. And then after that, I will follow up. Students, do you see something that is interesting from what other people are doing using the same hashtag? And then they try to find one picture and then try to share it. I think this guy did the same thing like what I did. So he just spent the weekend during this pandemic by reading a book. And then that's also the same. I also spend my weekend by reading a book. All right, so that's also one example for descriptive paragraph. And then when I ask the students, when I teach my students procedure text, like how to do something, this is interesting. So I ask some students to write, can you tell me how to cook fried noodle? And then after that, they really do it. Okay, I think the first thing we can do it, we can, They show me how to do it step by step. But this will be interesting if we can also ask them to upload it here. So for example, after they created the text, and then we have basically we have been sure that the text is good enough, and then they can upload it in Cookpad. And then, for example, this one, chicken nugget, how to cook chicken nugget. And then look at this one. So there's ingredients. Oh, just deep fry. Okay, this is not interesting. Now I'll try to find something else. But basically in this one, we can see there's the title, and then there's the ingredients, and then there's the steps. And then what is interesting is that, so look at this one, Brussels sprout in veggie sauce and egg with vessels. So there's ingredients, and then blah, 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 there is steps. So this is basically what we are teaching in procedure text. And then they post pictures, and this is what is interesting. There is comment, and sometimes there are the comments are random. They can be from your classmate, but they can be also from someone who is inside this, who are also inside the Cookpad. So that's also one ideas that you can also integrate in the classrooms. And also WikiHow. WikiHow is also interesting. We can also ask the students to, for example, how to write song lyrics, for example. And then this is actually co-authored by a lot of contributors. So we can actually ask students to, okay, think creatively about how to do something. And then after they have finished, we can upload it in WikiHow. So, and then they can work together in a small group and then do it. So we can use it as a project in the classrooms. All right. Okay, I think I'll go back to the slide. So that is what is called as collaborative and also creative learning practices. So I think what I want to highlight here is that we need to provide authentic tasks that allow students to be more creative, number one, and then number two, interactive. Interactive in a way that they can, it's not only about writing a paragraph, but sharing it with other people, and then they get feedback, and then they respond. And then if it is about this one, if we are using Google Docs or Google Drive in writing, after they get feedback, of course, they will become more reflective. And then by teaching WikiHow and Cookpad, for example, they will try to browse some examples there as the models, as the resource for learning. And then after that, it is not important for us to teach like, this is how we need to write procedure text, for example. Just ask them, okay, guys, we are going to write something in Cookpad. And then when we show them a Cookpad, and then they try to see, each post there, and then finally they get the idea. Aha, this is the generic structure of a procedure text that is usually posted in Cookpad. This is the generic structure of the text that is usually posted in WikiHow. So that is the idea of, making it authentic, making it interactive, and making it reflective. By looking at what other people are doing, it makes them reflect on what they are doing. And then after that, they are trying to revise what they have. All right, I think that's the second point of what will change in the future writing classrooms. And then number three, I think there will be more PBL or project-based learning, and also authentic learning activities. So so this is the thing. Student will be much more engaged if the learning activities are interesting and personalized. Student will be much more focused if they know what they want to learn, and if they are asked to complete a task that is challenging, authentic, and meaningful. Although it is a writing class, we still need to integrate other skills for students to learn how to write. So for example, reading, and also listening, because they need to get some information before they are writing. So this is the examples. So one day, I brought this article to my classroom. English as a second language, still a pipe dream. So this article was written by Muhammad Beni Saputra. So he is my colleague who is now working in Jambi. And this article is very interesting because basically the idea is that we need, Indonesia need to use English since elementary school. So the medium of instruction in elementary school, junior high school, senior high school until university, it needs to be English. And then I bring this article and then share to the students, what do you think about this articles? So they read the articles and then they said like, there are some pros, there are some cons. That's for sure. And then after that, I asked them, okay, what we are going to do today is try to write response article. We are going to write a response articles like these articles, and then after we finish, we will send the articles to Jakarta Globe, to Jakarta Post, and other media outlets. Basically, we are trying to respond these articles. And then how to do that? Now let's try to see some articles so that we can learn how to write a response article. And then after that, we really do that. We write the articles, and then we revise, we do some revisions, we do some peer review, and then I also review their paper, and then after that, we send them to some media outlets, like Jakarta Globe, Jakarta Post, and other media outlets. So to do that, the classroom learning will be much more authentic and also meaningful, because basically they are doing something that many people will see in the real life. So what I always try to say to my students is like, we need to think of what tasks students need to accomplish before the class starts, and then think of what they are writing in class will not only end up in a folder in their computer. So that's what we usually do in writing class. Okay, students, write this paragraph, write this text, and then after the class ends, that's it. So I think what we need to do is that we try to integrate that into something that is meaningful, something that has an end product, something that can be be posted somewhere else. So in article writing class, I taught the students how to write journals, and then at the end I asked some students to publish it in some journals too. And then also sometimes I ask them to post it in their blogs. In YouTube, we can ask students to write digital storytelling. And then in Twitter, I think I will try to show this one. This is interesting because, so for example, this one, when we are trying to teach the students narrative text, for example. Okay, students, today we are going to study narrative text. We are going to write a story. And then they write story, A Night in Tawangmangu, that is the title. Good night, guys. This Friday night, I want to tell you a horror story that I experienced when I was in Tawangmangu. And then use scary story, horror story, and the hashtag. And then when you want to add, and then after that, we add another tweet, and then, we try to write another story until it becomes a thread. And then what is interesting from there, after that, if students click this one, scary story, they can see other stories that other people are writing from different part of the world. So that is becoming much more authentic and interesting for students. All right, and then after that,
Christian,
yes,
for interrupting, you still have 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay, 5 minutes. Okay, and then comma full. This is interesting. So we can ask the students to create an account in comma full. So this is actually writing community. So many people many people write short story, and after that they post it here. And then look at this one. There are a lot of comments from other people. So this will be much more meaningful when we are doing this. So they can write their story and then post this and then get feedback from other people from other part of the world. And then they can also see other people's story. And then they can try to reflect on what other people have done in their post, in their story, so that they can, be motivated to write another story and then try to post it again. By doing this, of course, this is the idea of flipped learning, or autonomous learner, where students are interested to learn by themselves. All right, and then, okay, I think I will try to do it in 5 minutes, very fast. And then how do we know to what extent our students have learned in our second language writing classrooms? And then number one, I guess if we test our student using a good test, that is very simple and basic thing. how do we know if a test is good or bad? The test is good if it is valid, so it is testing what is being taught, or testing testing something that should be tested, and then reliable. So if we test someone 2 times, the result will relatively be the same. If we ask 2 people to check one word, the result will relatively be the same. And practical, something that is doable. And authentic, something that we can see in real life. And then having positive feedback, something that results in positive motivation for the student. So every time we create a test, we always need to ask ourselves whether or not the test we are creating fulfills all those 5 criteria. If not, then we need to modify the test. So I will show you number 1. When do we use simple present tense? That is the test that I see in grammar class. And then I said like, oh man, that is, people will not find that questions in real life. So that is not authentic. And then what are the generic structure of a descriptive paragraph? So that is the questions in writing class. I say like, no way, that should not be the questions, because basically that is just memorizations. And then I have also seen that is in writing class, but the test is in oral. The test is done orally. So, okay, what are the generic structure of descriptive paragraph? And then that is interview. I said like, no. So that is not valid, because that is, sometimes that is testing the answer, the fluency of the student. So it's not writing test, definitely. And then number 2 is only testing lower order thinking skill, which is like memorizations. All right, and then please write about the case of COVID-19 pandemic in South Africa in 3,000 words in 90 minutes. Definitely, 3,000 words for 90 minutes. This is not practical, not doable. And then please choose one of 3 following topics and write a descriptive paragraph in 100 words for 30 minutes. Yes, this is a good test because this is doable, and then it gives opportunities for students to choose which one that will be more comfortable for them to write and things like that. Okay, but the important point is that we need to check if it is good test or not a good test. Okay, please start 3 more minutes. Okay. Number 2, if we ask students to use higher order thinking skills. So this is the thing. We always need to remind ourselves that in second language writing classrooms, we are teaching our students writing skills. When we ask the students to write, it definitely asks them to do creative thinking skill. It involves something, creative thinking, critical thinking. But then when we ask them about the knowledge about the paragraph, like what are the generic structure of the text, what is the tenses used in this paragraph, we are only testing them the basic comprehensions or the lower order thinking skills of that paragraph. So what I want to highlight here is that we need to create a test that allows students to use their higher order thinking skill. To do that, cheating can also be minimized. And then finally, I think if we focus more on assessment for and as learning. So there are 3 types of classroom-based assessment: assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and then assessment of learning. We need to focus more on assessment for and as learning, as the first one inform teachers about what teachers need to improve, while the latter actually inform students to reflect upon their progress of learning. So, for example, after they finish writing, we give them feedback, and then we say like, oh, your score is A-, but you can improve it. And then after that, they revise their paper and then submit it to us. And then, okay, it looks good. And then now the score is A. So if we give students the time for reflection, we give the time for students to revise what they have done, to improve. That is the idea of assessment as learning. So as long as we are more focused on assessment as learning and assessment for learning, I think it will be much better for students' learning progress. And then in conclusions, I will try to highlight 5 points. Students learn how to write by writing. So it is really important for us to give our students more writing practices in writing classroom. So I have seen a lot of examples in Indonesia in writing classroom, but teachers are teaching reading. And then the more students read, the better students will write. So it is really important to provide them exposure to good text before writing. So recently, Dr. Willy Renandia, in one of the talks, talked about the importance of providing language nutrition, language processing, and also language use. Number 3, students will be encouraged to write if the task is interesting. So it is really important to make it personalized, meaningful, and authentic. Assessment should allow teachers and students to reflect and improve. So it is important to focus more on assessment for enhanced learning. And then finally, okay, this is the last one, Krista. Teachers to be an independent, autonomous, and long life learners. So it is really important to equip them with skills that allow them to do that even after the semester or the school year ends. So when it is just assessment of learning, after 3 days they will forget everything. So if students forget after 3 days of the end of the class, then we need to reflect on how to change the models of classroom in the next semester. Okay, I think that's all what I can share today. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Christian, for a very interesting presentation. So we have some question here in question and answer section. I'm going to read them for you. We still have 10 minutes for you to answer all the questions. Okay, so the first question is from Bapak Abdul Rahman Abe from University of Lampung. Bapak Abdul Rahman is now currently teaching literature review courses for the result of educational research and science learning. But somehow he has some difficulties in teaching his students. Most of his students have difficulty in capturing the main ideas of almost all sections of the article structure of foreign language articles in English. To strengthen the ability to read the articles, he uses multimedia in the form of video-based electronic module that discusses all article structure section in English. But still, he couldn't able to improve their skills. Could you suggest a best learning strategy to improve skill how to review articles for non-native?
Okay. Oh, okay. I think that is interesting. So I think I will try to share this one. So this is what I did in one of the classes that I taught in the fall 2019. So I taught article writing, in which the end product is the journal article. And then what I have done at that time is that I try to spend the first 4 weeks to ask the students just to read. So that's what I usually do in every writing classrooms. So I ask them to read 4 articles every week. And then after I ask them to read, what I ask them to do is to write annotated bibliography. So every week they need to report to me 4 annotated bibliographies. So, and then after that, in the following week, they will also do the same, like another 4 annotated bibliographies, another 4 annotated bibliographies, another 4 annotated bibliographies. After they have read at least 12 articles, then we start writing. So what I want to try to say here is that it is really important for students to know what they are going to write. So they need to have the ideas first, the content first, and then after that, they can take, the points of what is really in the articles that they are reading by writing the annotated bibliography. So this is not only copy and paste from the articles, but they try to, reading the whole article, and then after that they try to get, what is actually the main idea in these articles, and then they try to write in the annotated bibliography. And then after that, when I ask them, what have you read so far? What is the gap in all the research that you have done? What is the most interesting finding that you have found so far in the 12 articles that you have read? What is the common trend that you can see from the 12 articles that you have read? So I think that's what I usually do in my classes. So I will ask my students to read like at least 4 articles per week, so that they can get a better idea of what they want to try to write in their articles. But I guess if the students just read and that they don't do reflection on what they are reading by writing the annotated bibliography, I think that will be the case. So students will just say like, I cannot get the point from this article. So critical reading is very important if you can really integrate it in your writing class. I think that's my answer. Maybe Fahid will have additional point for that.
Sorry. Because we are lacking of time, so I think we just move to the second question. Oh, okay,
sure,
Fahid, you want
sure.
to say something? Okay.
No, I just wanted to say that was a good answer, actually. It's sometimes very difficult to find out why students don't learn. So there is this concept of I+1 that Stephen Krashen mentioned many years ago. I think it's important for us not to require students to read a text which is too difficult for them. So something that includes just a few new words should be a good start. Even if the students are in a research methodology class, perhaps there's no need really to ask them to read very difficult textbooks. We can perhaps create videos for them. We can simplify the text for them, so they will get the macro structure first, and once they got the idea of what they should expect to read in the main text, then you can allow them to dive into the main text and start to read. I'm taking Christian's time. I don't.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Fahid Aryadus, for your insight. And then I'm going to choose one more question for you, Christian. So it's
okay, sure.
Okay, the last one. the last question. So this is a question from Yasir Fahmi Mubarak. He's from Banjarmasin. He teaches micro-teaching class in his campus. He asks you whether there is a competencies for pre-service teacher that is urgent to be prepared in today's situation, since he cannot ask them to do traditional peer teaching.
Oh, okay. So this is what we do in Universitas 11 Maret. So because we know that next semester will be the teaching and learning process in school, especially. So if you are teaching micro teaching, definitely your students will do teaching practice in junior high school and also senior high school, and then the students will learn at home. And then the students who are going to do PPL or praktek pengalaman lapangan, and then they are going to teach in the school, they are going to do it from home. So what we are trying to teach our students now is actually how to teach online. So that of course include how to develop teaching materials to teach online, and then how to teach online, and then how to develop assessment materials and also administer the assessment materials. So that's what we are focusing today. So I think if you ask me what skills that the students need to have right now, and number one, of course, as we have learned before, number one is about the pedagogical knowledge. That's, of course, number one that we should teach to our students. We have to make sure that they know about teaching methodology, they know how to teach well in the classrooms, they know what to do in pre-activity, while activity, and post-activity. But number two is that about the content. We have to try to make sure that they know exactly what they are going to teach. They know the materials in the junior high school and senior high schools, especially if the schools in Indonesia are now teaching about text. They are for example, narrative text, descriptive text, and then explanatory text. We need to make sure that the students know that. And then number three is about technology, how the students can integrate the use of technology in the classroom, because that's how we are doing the teaching learning process in the classrooms at this time. So if we have if we have been sure that students know about the pedagogy, know about the content, what they are teaching, and also know how to integrate technology in their classrooms, I think it's like they're good to go. Okay, I think that's what I can respond.
Okay, thank you, Christian. So actually, we still have more questions, but we ran out of time. So I think that's enough. Maybe if the participants still want to have questions, I don't know, maybe they can send the question to Christian email, then Christian will answer the questions. Or if I'm not mistaken, Christian also has a YouTube channel. Yeah, it's new. I know it's new, but that's okay. I saw the channel and it's already good. The content is good. If you want to visit his YouTube channel, Christian, you can just type your YouTube channel here so that other people can like and then also subscribe your YouTube channel here.
Okay, so basically in my YouTube channel, I will share simple and practical classroom activities that teachers can use in their classrooms. And so if you are interested, you can just subscribe, and then I'm planning to update it daily. So it's very simple, like 5-minute video, and then it's very, very practical.
Daily. Okay, daily. Okay. Okay, so this one in the chat box, you can see Christian, Dr. Christian YouTube channel. You can like and subscribe his YouTube channel. Also for Dr. Fahid Aridus, he has also already sent his YouTube channel. You can also like and subscribe his channel. And then you can see in box chat, in the chat box, there is the link for the certificate, for the e-certificate for the day 2. Just click this link. The link will be valid until maybe 1 or 2 hours. So don't forget to fill in the link. Okay, thank you so much for Dr. Christian. Do you have any closing message before we close this webinar?
Oh yeah. Okay. I have prepared it.
Okay.
I have prepared it in. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the committee for the invitations and also for all attendees that are attending to the sessions. So I would like to say thank you for your tireless dedication as teachers during this challenging time. This is definitely not easy. To make sure that the school program keeps running, to make sure that our students keep learning, and to make sure that you are all doing the right thing in class by coming here today to learn more. You are all a hero, and our nation owes you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's what I wanted to say to all teachers today.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Christian, and also thank you, Dr. Fahid Aryadus. So thank you so much for all the participants for attending our international webinar from day 1 till day 2. As the committee, I am deeply sorry for the inconvenience because especially yesterday, we got a technical problem that our YouTube channel cannot be accessed. So it's out of our control, so we cannot do anything about that. Okay, before we close this webinar, I invite all of you to have kind of screenshot so that we're going to have take a picture in one frame. Can you please, what is that? Do the screenshot together. How to make it? So this one. Okay, so will all of you come into the panelists? Can you please help me, Mr. Gede? Mr. Gede, can you please help me to make all of the attendees become the panelists so that we can have the screenshots together? You're still mute. Mr. Gede, you're still mute. Still mute.
Yeah. Hang on. But I think it is not possible for me to do that.
Oh, okay. Who is the host? Fajar?
My camera is still off. Can you turn on, please? Turn it on, please. My camera. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is it possible for all of us to be included in one frame so that we can take a picture together? Is it possible?
Tias, Tias. Tolong Tias.
Novita?
If it is not possible, just
Oke, bisa. Yang lainnya juga bisa melakukannya.
Abi?
Okay. Please wait, Dr. Fahid and Christian. Please wait.
Pak Bambang? Pak Budi?
Ayo bantu semua mas. Promote ke panelis.
Mia Gigi, hari kenanya nih. Gigi, habis itu. Itu macam mana?
I'm sorry that I have to mute all of you so that it won't be noisy. Okay, shall we? Not yet.
Let me.
Okay, 3, 2. I'm going to unmute all of you so that it won't be noisy.
Okay.
The picture doesn't appear.
Yeah, big smile.
Okay.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
So,
smile.
Who's going to take the picture? Tias.
Very handsome and beautiful.
Okay, Tias.
Where is Tias?
I don't have video with me.
Tias.
Tias.
Screenshot.
I can see many people.
Yes, we were hiding.
Are we done? Not yet?
Sorry, something wrong with my camera, so I don't have my video with you.
No.
Okay.
Who's going to take the picture? Tias. Are we done?
My camera is broken. I cannot join the photo session. Sorry for me.
Something wrong with
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Hang on a second. We'll do it again. Okay. Yes, guys, you can take a screenshot.
You can share it.
Putra.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, I think it's done. Bapak Ibu.
Okay, done. Okay, thank you so much.
Prof.
Done?
Jarmo is
Okay.
here as well. Done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much for all the participants for attending this webinar, and thank you so much for Dr. Fahid Ariedos and also for Dr. Christian Adiputra for sparing their busy time in our webinar. See you again next time, and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye bye everyone.
Thank you,
Bye, Mr. Pista, Christian. Thank you, Fahid.
Bye bye. Take
Everyone.
care,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Sukses.
Bye.
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 Eka, De Eka.
Halo. Baik.
Halo, sukses ya. Sukses
Thank
Bu
you.
Ari. Thank you so
Makasih Bu
much.
Ayan, Pak Budi.
Yeah. Hey, hello everyone. And Christian too.
Apa kabar Pak Ujang?
Baik, alhamdulillah.
Waduh.
Pak Wayan di mana?
Ya,
Pak Wayan di mana?
Di rumah ya,
di rumah.
Ya.
tetanggo.
Di Lampung kayaknya ini, Bu.
Ya, sudah ya.
Sudah siap Bu.
Ya. Terima kasih Bu Ari semuanya.
Sama-sama, terima kasih semuanya.
Terima kasih semuanya. Terima kasih Bu Ari.
Sami-sami.
Terima kasih semuanya pada presenter.
Pak Gede, terima kasih banyak Pak Gede.
Wahid, terima kasih Pak Gede telah bisa participate all the committee hari ini.
Oke.
Saya mau belajar bahasa Inggris sama Miss Rapista.
Boleh.
Pokoknya habis ini populer loh.
Ya.